This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Frank Mahon. He was born November 30th, 1922. He served in Europe during World War II. He achieved the rank of sergeant. We're recording this on November 2nd, 2013. I'm Will Hines and I'm conducting this interview, no relation. So, Mr. Mahon, where did you grow up? You said you grew up in Greenville?
Greenville.
And what high school did you go to?
Greenville High.
Okay, so did you play any sports there, or
Pardon?
did you play any sports
No.
at Greenville High? When did you decide to go to Clemson? Because I know you went to Clemson, and what year did you go?
I entered Clemson in the fall of 1940,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know why I decided, except my folks, I brought all these catalogs home, look at them and see where you want to go.
And Clemson was a military school at that time, right?
Really, very much so.
So were you thinking about going in the military after
No,
that?
I wasn't thinking about it at the time.
So, and then you roomed with Wallace Story,
Mm-hmm.
who I previously interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and did you want to be an engineer when you went to Clemson?
Yeah, I did.
So engineering was still a big
Yes,
kind of
it
study
was.
there. So you go to Clemson and you start studying engineer, then all of a sudden Pearl Harbor
You're right.
happens.
Right.
And what were your thoughts on that? What was your reaction?
Well, I don't know. At that age, you don't react to something like, that's just another happening. But I didn't have any particular reaction to it.
Did you know you would be involved kind of
Well,
in the
I
war?
pretty much knew because they'd already started the draft before Pearl Harbor. So everybody was going into service one time or another.
Mm-hmm.
But I really didn't think much about it. Just these things just happen and you just kind of flow with the tide, it seems like.
Yeah. So when Pearl Harbor happens, how long is it before you enlist?
Actually, I signed up on my 18th birthday because there was an edict come out from the president that all boys a certain age will sign up.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a long time thereafter before I went into the service.
Really?
I went into the service, I think it was in the winter of 42, 43.
So you signed up. When did you turn 18? Do you know? Was it 42 or 41?
Well, I turned 41, I guess.
41.
Mm-hmm.
So how did your parents feel about you enlisting?
They didn't like it.
They didn't.
They didn't want me to go.
Mm-hmm. But you were.
I was signed up for the draft and was drafted.
You were drafted.
Mm-hmm. I didn't enlist,
Oh.
but you had to sign up for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I signed up when I was 18. The day I turned 18, if I remember right. And then I just waited for the draft to come and get me, so to speak.
And they did.
They did.
Wow. So your sophomore year, do you leave during the middle of a semester, or do you just?
I got to finish the sophomore year.
You got to finish sophomore year.
Yeah.
And then you headed out, and was that in 42 that you finished sophomore year?
Yeah.
So where do you go from there? Did they take you by train to a base somewhere, or?
Well, everybody in this area went to Fort Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the induction center. And from there, you either got in the Army, Navy, or whatever. And they said they gave you a choice, but they really didn't. I think it's whatever was in the demand at the time. So I went in the Army at Fort Jackson.
And did they know that you had previous engineering experience?
Well, of course, I put that down. I was taking engineering at Clemson, but I didn't have any experience.
Mm-hmm. But they needed engineers.
Yes.
So they chose you, and so you were inducted at Fort Jackson, and did you start training there, or were you shipped to somewhere else?
I was sent to Camp Claiborne in Louisiana, and we trained there at what you call Engineering Unit Training Center. we were only there for about 5 months and then went overseas.
Now, what did you specialize in? Do you specialize in anything when you're an engineer, or you just do it all? You know, bridges, like all that kind of stuff.
Well, an engineer in the Army is just like a laborer, really.
Really?
You build things, you tear down things and whatnot. So I didn't specialize in anything.
Mm-hmm. So did you learn about? Because I know there were floating bridges.
They had special units for floating bridges. Our unit used what called Bailey bridges. You may have heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
It was a portable bridge, and that was the only bridges we got into.
So you trained for 5 months, and what did that training consist of? Were there any
putting up bridges, like you say,
mm-hmm.
Landmine clearance?
Ooh, forgot about that.
Demolition, and also we trained as an infantry regiment.
So you went through some weapons training too?
Oh yeah, all that. We were trained as we were used as an infantry regiment during the Battle of the Bulge.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And so did you actually carry a weapon? Did you carry an M1
yeah,
Garand?
we carried M1 rifles.
So did you carry a carbine or a Garand, or do you remember?
Well, actually you could have your selection when we went overseas. Most of the time we carried the carbine because it was lighter.
Mm-hmm. I actually own one, and they are a lot smaller and lighter than the Garand.
Well, I have a Garand. You can mount it back there, but it's never been fired by me.
Wow.
So
you went through weapons training, and you also went through putting up bridges and stuff like that. But was your training longer than the normal infantryman, or shorter? Or?
It was probably about the same, but they were in a hurry to get people to England to start preparing for the invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I got caught up in that. When we went to England, we did a lot of training. We trained on putting up portable docks, and sort of like a erector set. You bolt a whole bunch of stuff together, and demolition and mine clearing and that sort of thing, and machine guns, rifles, and all that stuff in England. But
were you involved at all with the dummy army that was set up in England?
I didn't know about that till after the war. I just heard about it, but
because I was just wondering, because I figured you were an engineer. So did you have to do a lot of manual labor in England?
A lot of manual, digging ditches and all that kind of thing. Just about anything a construction company would do, but a very crude type way.
So you go over. When did you land in Normandy? How many days after D-Day?
It was in July.
In July.
The invasion started in June the 6th. About a month, I guess.
And where did you land? Where did you?
On the beach.
On which
we were
one?
still going across the beaches.
So you landed on Omaha or at the port, the artificial port that they set up?
we just landed on the beach. And I don't even remember where it was, in Omaha or the other one. But anyhow, we did go across the beach.
How did everything look?
It was, well, there's just a lot of debris scattered all over everything. All the guys that went ashore earlier, they would take off their life jackets and throw them out. Life jackets laying all around, debris, shell debris, and stuff like that.
Did you see a lot of the empty bunkers and?
Yeah, well, not a lot, but I did see them.
So you land and you go inland, and kind of what do you do from there?
Well, my regiment, we were not supposed, in the war, things seemed to change fast. We were supposed to go elsewhere, I think to the Brittany Peninsula, which is below the Normandy Peninsula. But I think the Army then decided the best thing they could do was capture Cherbourg, which was a major port. So we immediately went to Cherbourg and started clearing Cherbourg from debris and mines and all kind of barricades the Germans had erected.
Now, how do you clear a minefield? The best thing
is to blow them up. if you could just blow them up, run a tank across them or a bulldozer. That is a personnel mines.
Mm-hmm.
And,
But how do you clear an anti-tank mine? Is there anything specific to that? An anti-tank mine?
I don't remember anything specific.
Really? For a personnel mine, would you have to go digging around?
Well, you did if you're trying to clear a path so that people could go through. But we didn't do it. If we found a manned minefield, usually just run a bulldozer over it, and it would blow the mines up,
But it would just hit the bulldozer.
Yeah. That was personnel mine. And you wouldn't run a bulldozer across a heavy type mine because it would blow it up too.
So you went and cleared mines and you went to the port. What was the port's name again?
Cherbourg.
Cherbourg. And so you went to the port, and kind of what happened from there?
Well, we cleared of all the. First of all, the Army had to get material into the troop because the Army uses an awful lot of supplies, and the idea was to clear Cherbourg is a deep water port. You can bring ships in, and so the idea was get it so it was operational, and we did everything imaginable, like clearing debris, and the Germans had really messed it up, destroyed it practically, so we couldn't use it immediately. So we just cleared all kind of, mostly it was clearing. They had built concrete barricades, we blew those up and things like that.
Did they put much debris and ship mines in the water at all?
I don't remember any. Now the Navy took care of anything that was out in the water. We didn't have to worry about that part of it.
Good. So you cleared that port, and had you come in contact with any German forces yet? Was the front already pushed up?
The front end was moving pretty rapidly. I didn't contact any particular enemy, so to speak. We had oodles of German prisoners.
Oh, really?
Just floods of them because the Normandy Peninsula was cut half in two, and there was a bunch of Germans on the western half that couldn't get out, so to speak. I think there was something like 35,000 Germans surrendered in Normandy, and we used those to help us clean up, labor and whatnot. Oh yeah, we had whole groups of German prisoners working.
So did you work alongside of them? Or?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Really wasn't any real problem.
Did any of them speak English? Did you ever talk to any?
Crudely, but not very well.
Wow. So after you cleared the port, kind of where did you go from there? Or?
We went to eastern France, and I don't know what we were going to do there, but we went to a town called Verdun. You probably have heard of Verdun.
I've heard of Verdun.
And our regiment was there, and this was in early December, and the Germans broke through for the Battle of the Bulge right north of Verdun. So then we were converted to we weren't converted, we were already ready for it. We were used as a infantry regiment attached to the 3rd Army, and we advanced from there up through Luxembourg and east of Luxembourg to the Moselle River, and we were in a holding position, so to speak, for about 33 days as an infantry regiment.
Were you all in reserve in case they broke, or were you just actually in a defensive position at the river?
We were in primarily a holding position. They would send patrols across at night and things like that, and shells, and they would shell us a lot. We shell them and whatnot. But we never ran advance on the Germans.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing. Whenever you were going across France to go up there, did you travel by truck?
Yeah, always by truck.
How bumpy was it? Was it hard to sit there the whole time on the ride, or was it?
Well, during the Battle of the Bulge, it was very, very cold. Tremendously. It snowed the whole time, seems like. and you had to keep your tops down on the truck because you had to jump out in case you were attacked from the air. So it was a cold, cold ride.
Because the tops were down.
With no top, and we didn't have proper clothing, I don't think. But anyway, that was the worst part. Was the roads were pretty good. We traveled, regular concrete roads, and
Really?
right amongst a whole bunch. The whole Third Army moved to the north into the German flank, so to speak, and we were part of that. But tanks really they could go across fields, but they usually, if they had a good road, they just used it. And so we used the roads.
So you don't think you had proper winter clothing for that?
Well, we didn't, and we really weren't prepared for it. But we made it out. We had these heavy army overcoats. The worst thing were your feet. They would get wet or damp, and so cold. You had a lot of frostbitten feet and whatnot.
So and then you went up to the river, and you had a holding position there.
Right.
And so then we won the Battle of the Bulge. We stopped the German advance, and then what did you kind of do from there?
We were withdrawn back into a camp in France, and I guess we were going to rotate to the Pacific. After the Bulge, the Army knew that the Germans had lost the war, so they didn't need us as an infantry regiment. So we were pulled back to this camp, and we stayed there till the decision was made whether we would go directly to the Pacific or come home. Fortunately, we had enough points. They had point systems, whereby if you had so many points in a regiment, they would come home for a 30-day leave before they went on the Pacific. But we didn't. We had enough points mostly, so we got to come home eventually. But we stayed in camps. So you didn't have transports like you have now. Everybody flies to these places,
right?
Because we had to sit in a camp, wait for a boat to come along, and there was so many troops in England. I mean, in France.
So after the Bulge, did you participate in the Battle of the Rhineland? Didn't you say
No.
you had? Okay.
Well, I don't know why we have it's on my discharge that we were in the Rhineland area. So the Bulge was part of the Rhineland area.
Oh, it was, yes, sir.
Yeah.
So you get on the troop transport after probably a month or two of waiting.
Yeah.
And you go back to America.
Well, we went back to England,
Oh.
and after the war was over, and then from England we went up to Scotland and got on the Queen Mary. It was a troop transport.
I think I've heard of the Queen Mary.
Well, the Queen Mary was probably the second largest troop ship they had. It was prior to the war, it was a regular commercial ocean liner.
What in a normal cruise ship almost ocean liner?
Well, it was built for transatlantic. People didn't have airplanes to fly the Atlantic, so everybody took a ship if you're going from New York to England, and Queen Mary was one of the line ships.
I think my professor who teaches the World War II class said that his parents took the Queen Mary over to England and Europe in the late 1930s before the war actually started.
Right.
Okay, that's where I heard of it. So,
but it was converted to a troop transport, and it was painted the gray color and took out all the luxury features and whatnot. Well, I went overseas on the Queen Mary and came back on the Queen Mary. Just happened to look up on that.
Wow.
Because it was a real fast ship.
Yeah, wasn't it? Do you remember going to the zigzag?
Yeah, going over we zigzagged.
Did you have an escort when you were going over, or were you just?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. We went. My regiment went to New York to a camp there to wait to get on the ship. But the camp was about, I guess about 50 miles north of New York City. So they got us on a train to go to overseas, and we knew we were going to go to New York City. And I'd never been in a big city. And said, okay, now you've got to keep your curtains down. We don't want the Germans around or spies or whatnot to be able to see these troops. So
Right.
we pulled the curtains down. This was late in the afternoon at night. And I've got to see New York. I've never seen it. And so I put my shade up about that high. I was peeping out at the big city. Sergeant came up, put that curtain down. But that was all of New York I saw. We went right down to the dock. The Queen Mary dock right in on the Hudson River, right beside the Normandy. Have you ever heard of the Normandy?
The Normandy.
It was a French transatlantic ship, and it was in New York when the war started. So they kept it there. They didn't let it go back to France.
Right.
But when they were working on it, some welder's torch or something, it caught on fire and it turned over. And it was laying right beside where the Queen Mary docked. It's just
So
a
it was
big
just
old
a turned
hole.
over ship?
It rolled over on its side in the harbor. So we saw that. That was the first sign of war that we saw, was that big ship just rolled over on its side.
So, whenever you were in Europe, did you ever see any planes coming overhead, you know, strafing planes and all that kind of stuff?
We were never strafed. In fact, the German Air Force had about given up on England when we got there. We did have some bombing raids, didn't mount anything.
Did you ever see any aerial combat overhead when you were in France?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Really?
In fact, I kid Wallace about this all the time. We were bombed by our own Air Force several times, and we were strafed by it. If this would happen now, it'd be a tremendous controversy about it.
It would.
But then it was war, and we just took it for granted.
So it was probably Wallace doing that to you.
Well, I blamed him.
Naturally.
Yeah. He flew B-17s. And
So he flew 35 missions, didn't he?
I believe he did.
Wow.
And he was flying over me when I was on the ground. So, and we did get bombed real badly one time. And
By our own bombers.
our own planes, which we couldn't see because they were way up high
You just
in overcast.
knew you were being bombed. And did you have foxholes to jump into? Did you make foxholes a lot?
Yeah. But when we were bombed by our own Air Force, we didn't even know what was going to happen until it was happening.
And so it caught everyone off guard.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
But I've enjoyed kidding Wallace about it. He always bragged about the Norden bomb site, and they could drop a bomb down a smokestack. You've heard that story. And they couldn't even find
find the right area to
bombing their own troops.
So you get back to the United States. You don't have to go to the Pacific, thankfully.
The war ends while I'm home in the Pacific.
That's great. So, how was it going home for the first time?
Well, you want to go home, but then after being overseas, I was overseas for 2 years, and everything had changed so, and people were different. All the girls had grown up or gotten married and that sort of thing. And I don't know, it wasn't what I had anticipated. I thought coming home would be the greatest thing in the world.
Right, but
it wasn't.
It was just different.
Yeah, it was so different.
And so you went back to Clemson.
Well, yeah, I did go back to Clemson after being home about 6 months.
Wallace convinced you.
He was the one that got me to go back because he had heard all about the GI Bill and that sort of thing, and I hadn't for some reason. And so I went back with Clemson and spent a year at Clemson.
Now Clemson didn't have any girls that went to the school at that time,
No
did
girls.
it? Where would y'all meet your? I know because I heard that a lot of the students at that time would go somewhere and meet girls or hang out with girls. Was there like a girls' college kind of near there, or?
No. They go to Greenville. Greenville
Mm-hmm.
had a women's college, which is now part of Furman. I don't know.
Maybe it was
Well, when we came back, the country was flooded with veterans. And
even in Greenville, Clemson area.
oh yeah.
Wow.
You should have seen Clemson after the war. Had all these veterans over there, and it was just kind of wild.
Was it all a homecoming for them? Because they were all coming back, and were they finishing school at Clemson?
Yeah.
So I bet that must be a different atmosphere for all those men to be getting back from war and then going back to school.
Oh, it was crazy, and a lot of the guys were kind of. Oh, that's the mail lady. She talks on the phone and she delivers the mail. For instance, do you know what it used to be called, the 8th Barracks at Clemson?
The 8th Barracks. Is that?
You know where the quadrangle is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a building built behind the quadrangle, and it was new when we first went to Clemson. And it was all concrete and brick. And one of these veterans came down and drove his motorcycle down the hall in that concrete, and it made the office racket.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It just did things like that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Just doing whatever, I guess.
Yeah.
How big was Clemson's campus at that? Well, I bet during the war, so many of the a lot of the guys left to go fight. Did Clemson even, was it still running? Did it still offer classes?
The Army had some kind of training at Clemson. They took up some room, but my whole class went into the service just about. I don't think anyone, well, there may have been a few that graduated in 1944, but not many.
Wow. I know there's still housing and that still has the gun racks from it being a military school, and my friend actually lived in that dorm last year. So that's just really interesting that that's still there, and I'm sure are a lot of the buildings still there from.
Well, all the quadrangle buildings. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir, I do.
They're all there, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
In the 8th Barracks, when I was there, was one of the newest buildings, and I'm sure it's still there. I don't know what it's used for now.
Mm-hmm. It probably is.
But they were all called barracks when we were at Clemson.
They weren't called dorms, were they?
You had a community bathroom, no air conditioning, and it got hot.
I'm sure it did, especially South Carolina heat.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Mann, I thank you so much for letting me interview you, and thank you for
you're quite
everything you
welcome.
did for this country.
Appreciate you coming over.
Yes, sir. Thank you.